then, action movies didn't stop to explain things. They just pushed you straight into danger and trusted you to follow along. In 1981, Paramount Pictures released Raiders of the Lost Ark, a world-traveling adventure directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by George Lucas. The movie starred Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, a fedora-wearing archaeologist who solved problems with a whip, a revolver, and an amazing ability to handle pain. Karen Allen played Marion Ravenwood, one of the toughest love interests of that time. John Rhys Davies, Denholm Elliott, and Paul Freeman completed a cast that made ancient history feel dangerous again. Today, we're diving into 15 strange facts about Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But before we grab the fedora, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps this channel discover more behind-the-scenes chaos from the movies that shaped a generation. All right, let's get into it. And stay around for number 14, because the moment that defined Indiana Jones was made up on the spot by an actor who could barely stand.
Number 1. Harrison Ford didn't fake the truck chase. He survived it. Harrison Ford didn't pass the Nazi truck chase to a stunt double.
I'm sure it's not dangerous. See, if it was dangerous, they would wait until we got more of the movie done.
He was the stunt double. The stunt was inspired by a famous moment from Stagecoach, but this wasn't some carefully padded tribute. The crew dug a trench under the road so Ford could be pulled under the truck while it rolled over him. He wore a hidden harness, and the whole scene was filmed in one continuous take, and the truck flip used no hydraulics or digital help.
So I want to see, well, how's the second unit with the truck chase? And, then we remember, Daly's have to go to England and then come back to Tunisia. So it was a couple days before I would see any of the dailies from me.
The stunt team shot a telephone pole straight up through the truck's floorboards, sending the vehicle into the air like a metal rag doll. Pause the movie at the right frame and you can still see the pole doing the hard work. Between the dragging, the hits, and the back-to-back real stunts, that sequence secured Ford's reputation as a leading man who earned every bruise and turned Raiders into the gold standard for real action filmmaking.
And then, of course, Steven went back and filled in all the close shots with Harrison. I was able to make one shot for Steven with actually Harrison being dragged.
Today, that sequence would use motion capture, pre-visualization, and a small army of safety coordinators. But in 1980, they dug a hole, trusted the math, and let Ford take the hit.
Number 2. Tom Selleck was originally Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford wasn't the first choice for Indiana Jones. He wasn't even the second, to be honest. The role belonged to Tom Selleck. Selleck did a screen test, and he nailed it.
We ended up doing a screen test with Tom Selleck and Sean Young, and it was really, really good. I mean, they were both terrific actors, and it turned out really well.
Spielberg and Lucas were convinced. He had the charm, the physical strength, and the confident style of a leading man. He accepted the role, and Indiana Jones officially became his. Then CBS stepped in and caused a problem. Selleck had already filmed a pilot for a small show called Magnum P.I.
At that time, the head of CBS said, wait a minute, we have a series commitment with Tom Selleck called Magnum P.I., and he greenlit the series. Tom had a TV series that took him to great, heights of fame and fortune, and we had nothing.
When the network picked up the show, they refused to let him out of his contract. Spielberg and Lucas rushed to find a solution. Filming was getting very close, and their Indiana Jones was legally stuck in Hawaii wearing Hawaiian shirts. Here's where it gets painful. A television writer's strike happened soon after, delaying Magnum P.I. for months. In a slightly different timeline, Selleck could have done both. He would have finished Raiders and owned the franchise forever. Instead, the door opened a little for someone else. George Lucas had resisted casting Harrison Ford. He didn't want to use his Star Wars lead again so soon. But with no time left, Ford stepped in with a different energy.
Turned out CBS wouldn't let me do it. They held the offer out for about a month. Harrison Ford hates to hear this. And Harrison, this is your role and you're indelible in it. So it's just an interesting story.
He was less polished and more annoyed. A hero who survived through toughness, not elegance. Number 3. The flying wing explosion went sideways, and everyone ran for their lives. The desert airfield showdown in Raiders has one of the most exciting explosions of the 1980s.
A Nazi flying wing spins out of control and then blows up in a huge fireball. The production team built a full-size flying wing with a steel frame, plywood skin, and heavy enough to look like a real plane. Vickers in the UK built it and shipped it out like military equipment. This thing wasn't a light prop, it had real presence. For the final shot, Spielberg wanted it to feel real, so the effects team filled the plane with real fuel and live fireworks. Light the fuse, film the explosion, move on. But the blast had other ideas. When it went off, it was way hotter than anyone expected. A wall of fire ripped across the airfield. Pieces flew in directions nobody planned for. Crew members and extras scattered like someone yelled incoming and meant it. Somehow, no one was seriously hurt. Once the smoke cleared and everyone made sure they still had all their limbs, Spielberg watched the footage. He kept the shot, of course.
Number 4. Karen Allen was accidentally set on fire, and they kept filming. The Nepal bar fight in Raiders looks wild on screen. There's fire everywhere, bottles breaking, and Marion holding her own like someone who has thrown punches before.
If I was going to swing a punch, I wanted to swing a punch, and I wasn't going to, kind of do it halfway.
Some of that chaos was a little too real, though. Crew members stood just off camera with wet blankets and fire extinguishers, ready to help if things went wrong. And things did go wrong. During filming, Allen's costume caught on fire. Flames ran up her back before anyone realized it wasn't part of the scene. A crew member rushed in and put it out immediately. Allen wasn't hurt, but she was understandably shaken.
First experience with acting to nothing, it was Steven over on the sidelines going, and now the head is exploding, and there's something coming out, which I have now since done so many times on so many films.
And then, because this was 1980 and safety shutdowns weren't really a thing, they just kept filming. The wild energy in the final scene has a real edge. Part of it comes from the fact that moments earlier, Allen had actually been on fire. The adrenaline was real, and the fear was earned. Marion Ravenwood survived the bar fight, and Karen Allen was just happy to survive the set. Number 5. The boulder got bigger because Spielberg couldn't let it go. The boulder chase at the start of Raiders is famous in pop culture. Indy grabs the idol, the trap sets off, and a 22-foot fiberglass ball tries to crush him into archaeological paste. Originally, that chase was meant to be quick. Then Spielberg watched the boulder roll. He loved it. The size, the speed, and the funny but exciting sight of Harrison Ford running from a giant ball like his life depended on it, which, in this case, it did. So Spielberg did what he does best. He made the path longer for more distance, more tension, and more takes of Ford outrunning a mechanical prop that didn't care about timing. Spielberg later called the decision completely crazy.
All was my idea where we were knocking out set pieces and making suggestions. I just said, at some point some huge boulder should start chasing Indy and almost squishes him 3 or 4 times until he gets out of the cave, and that was just something I thought up.
Directors speak for, wow, that could have gone very wrong. And here's the twist. On set, the boulder made almost no sound. Hollow fiberglass rolling on a track is nearly silent. All that weight and danger you feel watching the scene came later. Sound designer Ben Burt had to create the terror from scratch. He layered recordings of a car rolling over gravel with thunder, low impacts, and carefully placed echo effects. Suddenly, a lightweight prop sounded like 10 tons of ancient revenge. The final sequence lasts longer than planned, hits harder than expected, and opened a blockbuster with one of the most copied shots in movie history.
Number 6. 7,000 snakes weren't enough. 7,000 snakes.
We have to get more snakes. You know what we really need? We need about 7,000 snakes in addition to the 2,000 we have here to make it work.
That's how many the production wrangled for the Well of Souls set. Enough to cover the floor in slithering, hissing chaos. And it still wasn't enough. Under the hot studio lights, the cold-blooded performers started slowing down. Many got sluggish, and some curled up. Others fell asleep mid-scene like they had wandered onto the wrong call sheet. So the crew improvised, cutting thousands of feet of rubber hoses into snake-length pieces and scattering them across the pit. Real snakes, fake snakes, sleeping snakes, it all blended into one unbroken carpet of reptiles. Harrison Ford had to walk right through the mess, even though he was very afraid of snakes.
In the famous shot of me facing the cobra, you can barely see a reflection on the sheet of glass that was between myself and the cobra.
The man got dragged under trucks without complaining, but the snake pit really scared him. Karen Allen had it worse in one particular shot. A live cobra was placed just inches from her face, with only a sheet of plexiglass between her and the venomous snake. The cobra lunged during filming and hit the glass hard. If you pause the movie at the right frame, you can still see a faint reflection, a tiny ghost of the barrier that kept the production from making a very different kind of headline. The audience saw endless horror. The crew saw controlled chaos held together with hoses and hope.
Number 7. Indiana Jones was born from a beach walk and a bruised ego. One of cinema's greatest action heroes was first imagined on a beach by two guys who should have been doing literally anything else. It was 1977. Spielberg had just been rejected for his dream job directing a James Bond movie. Meanwhile, George Lucas was hiding out in Maui, avoiding the stress of the upcoming Star Wars premiere like it owed him money. Spielberg started venting. He still wanted to make a globe-trotting adventure film, a hero who punched first and never asked questions. Lucas perked up and said, "I've got something better than Bond. Not suave, scrappy. A beat-up archaeologist who bled, improvised, and fought his way through history instead of gliding through it." Lucas had been thinking about the idea for years. He even had a name ready, Indiana Smith.
The Indiana Jones story started before I was working on the screenplay for Star Wars.
Spielberg liked everything except that Smith sounded like a guy who unclogged drains. So they changed it right there on the sand. Indiana Jones. That casual conversation became the foundation for Raiders of the Lost Ark and eventually brought in Lawrence Kasdan to turn their beach idea into a real screenplay. Spielberg lost Bond, Lucas avoided his own premiere, and somehow that mix of rejection and avoidance gave us a fedora, a whip, and one of the most lasting heroes in movie history. Hollywood's a bit weird like that. Number 8. Spielberg's childhood dream became the first shot in the movie. Before Steven Spielberg was directing big hits, he was a kid making home movies, already thinking like a studio boss. He created a pretend production company called Playmount. The name was a mix, part Paramount, part a play on his last name, Spielberg, which roughly means Play Mountain in German. So the kid basically named his fake studio after himself and Hollywood's biggest mountain logo at the same time. But here's the idea that stuck with him. Even as a child, Spielberg imagined the studio mountain turning into a real one, a smooth change from logo to movie. He kept that idea for years, waiting for the right project to use it. Raiders was the project. Spielberg sent producer Frank Marshall on a very specific mission across Hawaii. Find a mountain that could pass for Paramount Peak. Not just a vague look-alike, a match. Marshall spent hours driving around the island, comparing ridgelines to a corporate logo, like the world's most scenic scavenger hunt. He finally found Mount Schubert, took some pictures, and brought them back. Spielberg loved it immediately. That dissolve, Paramount's peak melting into a real Hawaiian mountainside, became the very first image audiences saw in Raiders. A childhood idea, decades in the making, pulled off in one quiet change before the adventure even begins. Spielberg pushed the nostalgia even further. Instead of using Paramount's current 1981 logo, he used the version from the 1940s. It was older, rougher, and fit perfectly with the period setting. Before Harrison Ford appears, before anyone says a word, the movie is already showing you this story belongs to another time. A kid's homemade production company logo became the plan for the opening shot of one of the biggest films of the decade. Spielberg had been practicing for Raiders since grade school. He just needed a few decades and a Hawaiian mountain to make it real. Okay, we'll take a quick pause, because if you're enjoying this trip through Hollywood chaos and melting Nazis, hit like and subscribe. It keeps this channel going and helps us uncover more stories from the movies that shaped us.
Okay, let's get back to the countdown with number 9. Spielberg used old Hollywood tricks to build Raiders. And finish it. Raiders of the Lost Ark looks like a movie that spent a fortune. Every frame shows style and importance.
Indy! Ow! Jesus!
Where'd you get this? From him?
I was trying to escape! No thanks to you.
Spielberg was actually saving money. Working with a tight budget, he figured out something nobody would notice. Instead of building every period scene from scratch, he raided the studio vault. The 1930s Washington, D.C. streets came from the Hindenburg, a 1975 disaster film that had nothing to do with archaeologists or melting faces. The plane that carries Indy and Marion out of Nepal came from Lost Horizon, a 1973 adventure most people had already forgotten. That same old-school craftsmanship shows up in the final shot, too. After everything Indy survives, the Ark gets boxed up, stamped with a label, and wheeled into an endless government warehouse. No victory lap, just bureaucracy swallowing divine power like extra office furniture. Spielberg borrowed that moment directly from Citizen Kane, where Wells pulls the camera back to show a warehouse of forgotten treasures with Rosebud tossed among them like it never mattered. Same visual style, same gut punch, just a different fedora. The warehouse itself wasn't real. Mad artist Michael Pangrazio painted the whole thing on glass, leaving a small space for one worker pushing the crate into oblivion. One man, one box, endless shelves fading into nothing. A pulp adventure suddenly felt mythic, almost tragic. Spielberg reused Hollywood's past to build Raiders, then used one final classic trick to remind us that even legends get filed away. Number 10. R2-D2 and C-3PO are hiding in the Well of Souls. Lucasfilm artists have never been able to resist a good Easter egg, and Raiders has one of the best hidden in plain sight. Carved into the golden pillars of the Well of Souls, right there in ancient Egypt, are two very familiar droids. R2-D2 and C-3PO appear as hieroglyphics, like they've been trapped in that tomb for 3,000 years. The clearest one is on a pillar just to Indy's left as he and Selleck get ready to lift the Ark's stone lid. Art director Norman Reynolds had worked on both Star Wars and Raiders, and apparently couldn't resist leaving a little cross-franchise graffiti behind.
But everything in there was really entirely Egyptian, apart from little engravings of 3PO on the wall, one or two other little niceties that...
Sharp-eyed viewers have noticed a second carving deeper in the scene, one that seems to show Princess Leia putting the Death Star plans into R2. That moment from A New Hope is immortalized as Egyptian art. The tradition continued. The droids showed up again in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, hidden in a throne room tile like a stowaway. A secret handshake between two franchises and a reward for the fans who freeze-frame everything.
Number 11. Raiders went from a popcorn movie to an official national treasure. In 1999, the Library of Congress did something quietly amazing. It chose Raiders of the Lost Ark for preservation in the National Film Registry. That's the list for films considered culturally, historically, or artistically important. Very formal words for a movie where a guy shoots a swordsman because he was too tired to choreograph a fight. But there it was, Raiders, sitting in the same national category as Star Wars, Citizen Kane, and Casablanca. Spielberg and Lucas never planned for Raiders to be important. They wanted it fast, fun, and old school. No prestige goals, no awards campaigning, just a 2-hour adrenaline shot wrapped in a leather jacket and a fedora. Nearly 20 years later, the U.S. government looked at that adrenaline shot and said, yeah, protect this one forever. Being added to the registry means a perfect copy now lives in the library's moving image collection, preserved against decay, so future generations can see every dust particle, whip crack, and melting Nazi exactly as it was meant to be. Indiana Jones spent the whole movie chasing artifacts and protecting history. Turns out, history was paying attention. The man who belongs in a museum finally ended up next to one. Number 12. George Lucas spent a whole day trying to get a monkey to do a Nazi salute.
In the Cairo marketplace scenes, Indy and Marion pick up an unwanted traveling companion, a small capuchin monkey that looks cute until you realize it's working for the other side. The monkey is a Nazi spy. It reports back to Belloc. It even gives a tiny Nazi salute to its superior officers. Getting that salute on film almost drove George Lucas crazy. The monkey had been trained to raise its arm on cue. During rehearsal, no problem. But the moment the cameras rolled, it refused to do it. So the crew dangled a bunch of grapes just out of frame, high enough that the monkey had to reach straight up to grab them. Then they filmed it again and again, more than 50 takes of a capuchin reaching for fruit, hoping one would look like a military salute. George Lucas supervised the whole thing as a second unit director. The man who created an entire galaxy spent his afternoon negotiating with a primate over snack placement. By all accounts, he was not happy with how his day went. But somewhere in that mountain of footage, one take worked. The arm went up at the right angle, held just long enough, and they captured it before the monkey changed its mind. Harrison Ford did his own stunts. Karen Allen survived being set on fire, and a capuchin monkey held an entire second unit hostage with nothing but stubbornness and a love for grapes.
Number 13. Indiana Jones's fedora had to be built to survive the movie. Indiana Jones without the fedora is just a sweaty professor having the worst week of his life. The hat makes the silhouette. It defines the character and is non-negotiable. The hat also kept flying off. During early stunt work on Raiders, the fedora had no interest in staying put. Running through temples, getting dragged behind trucks, every action moment could have ruined the hat, and reshooting because the fedora went rogue wasn't really in the budget. So the costume team stopped treating it like just a hat and started treating it like gear. They modified the inside with hidden elastic that secured the fedora directly to Harrison Ford's head with a discreet rigging system. That let Ford run, fight, and dive without the hat flying off into the air. The fix worked. Costume designer Deborah Nadoolman-Landis had already spent time making the hat look worn. She rolled it, crushed it, sat on it, gave it the kind of wear that made it feel like Indy had owned it for years.
The audience had to buy Harrison, even in this exaggerated heroic part, as an earthy, brilliant archaeologist.
That broken-in shape helped it sit lower on Ford's brow, which made the elastic's job easier. Indiana Jones survived ancient traps and melting Nazis. His fedora survived something even harder, filmmaking. Number 14. Tunisia almost shut Raiders down and gave us its funniest scene. Tunisia was supposed to give authenticity. Endless desert, blazing sun, the perfect stand-in for 1930s Egypt. Instead, it delivered food poisoning. Almost the entire cast and crew went down. Not mild discomfort, full collapse. People dropped on set, schedules fell apart, more bodies were horizontal than vertical. Harrison Ford got hit hard. He lost weight fast, worked in short bursts, and spent most of his downtime trying not to fall over. One person stayed fine, Spielberg. He had packed suitcases full of canned food before leaving the States. SpaghettiOs, pork and beans, nothing local, nothing risky. While everyone else gambled on the water and lost, he sat in his tent eating room-temperature pasta and kept directing. That careful packing may have saved Raiders. With the crew wiped out, having a working director was the only thing keeping production from shutting down completely. Then came the Cairo marketplace scene. The script called for an elaborate whip versus sword duel, big choreography, multi-day shoot. Stunt performer Terry Richards had trained for weeks, spinning his blade like a madman, expecting serious screen time. Ford watched him warming up, exhausted, sick, and barely upright, and made a suggestion that changed everything. "Why don't I just shoot him?" Spielberg said yes immediately. Nobody expected the shortcut to work the way it did. That single gunshot became one of the biggest laughs in movie history and perfectly showed who Indiana Jones is. No flash, just a guy who solves problems fast and moves on. Raiders almost died in Tunisia. Spielberg survived on canned pasta. Ford survived on grit. And exhaustion gave us a moment so perfect, it defined the character forever.
Well, I'm coming with you, Jones. Get me out of here. Cut me loose. You can't leave me here.
If I take you out of here now, they'll start combing the place for us.
Jones, you gotta get me out of here. Come on, Jones. Are you crazy?
Number 15. Raiders didn't need Indiana Jones in the title, until it did. The movie hit theaters in 1981 as Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, just Raiders. Paramount looked at a film starring a brand new action hero nobody had ever heard of and said, the title's fine, they'll figure it out. Bold move. It worked. By the time the boulder started rolling, audiences knew exactly who Indiana Jones was.
The fedora, the whip, John Williams blasting through the speakers, the character introduced himself just fine without his name on the marquee. For years, that was the title everyone knew. Then the sequel came, and George Lucas decided the franchise needed uniform branding. Same hero, same naming pattern, easier shelf placement at Blockbuster. The title Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark first appeared on the 1999 VHS reissue and stayed through the 2003 DVD release. Same movie, new label on the box. But here's the thing, the film itself never changed.
Let's go see him together. I've got nothing better to do.
Uncle Indy, come back home now! Uncle Indy, get back!
The Library of Congress preserved it under the original name. Film historians still refer to it that way. The branding caught up eventually, but the movie itself never changed. Indiana Jones became a household name without needing his name in the title. The title just took a few years to show what everyone already knew. And that's 15 weird facts about Raiders of the Lost Ark, a movie built on chaos that somehow became a cultural treasure, a film about chasing history that ended up being preserved as history, right next to the things Indy would have told you belong in a museum. So make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your favorite Indy moment below.